Are there any or any problems? I moved the router closer. Is this working properly? Today's topic is Satchitananda. I don't know. I don't know. I moved the I moved the router closer. I don't know what to do. It doesn't seem to be working like it used to. All right. Well, some people say that this is good and clear, and some people say it's blurry. So I have no technical abilities, so this is probably as good as it's going to get. Hopefully, it works. Do you really believe that the world can change in our favor? See, your world is your world. Like, they overlap, and the overlapping is the consensus, I guess, world. But the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, to me, that means that every person's life is a world in and of itself. So your world can definitely change and be the opposite of what the consensus world is, because the what the consensus world is, that's going into hell. Like, we are have entered the gates of hell, and we're just getting deeper and deeper. The consensus, but each individual, their world doesn't have to be a part of that world. So no, the consensus world is not changing in anyone's favor. It's developing into a literal hell. But holding to the practice and realizing, becoming lucid in this nightmare, you deal with it, right? Because if you have ever been lucid in a dream, you realize that none of that really matters, and you can kind of just chill and have fun in the dream, even though it's terrible, even though it would be a nightmare if you weren't lucid. But if you're lucid in the dream, then that which used to terrify you and give you anxiety will no longer. So the consensus for non-conceptualists, that world should be getting better. The spiritual life isn't about making the dream a better dream, it's about waking from the dream. Hi. That's what you think? Just sit down. Yeah, and just chill. How did the world reveal itself to you when you first woke up? You mean this morning or the big wake up? The world revealed itself to be a dream. But what was more real than before? So what changed was that I was aware of the observer. There was something, inner light or frequency or something, awareness, an inner awareness that was not, I didn't know that it existed. I wasn't aware of the awareness. And then upon waking, you are aware of the awareness. So it's exactly like being lucid. Again, if you've ever been lucid in a dream, you go from not knowing who you really are, thinking that you're the dream character, into realizing that you're not the dream character, but you're the dreamer. And everything changes. Nothing within the dream changes, but your perspective of the dream changes, right? Your perspective changes. So, what's more real is the frame of reference upon which all of this arises and passes, and that is the awareness. So, there's a silent, unchanging isness that's behind, underneath, that's the substrate, I guess, that all of this is built upon. And that becomes more real than thoughts and sensations. So having awareness rooted in that, the observer, in the awareness itself, in that frame of reference, it's like the world, thoughts and sensations move to the periphery. So, yes, it's like driving on a Saskatchewan highway. The southern Saskatchewan is very flat, and the highways are straight as an arrow. So while you're driving, you can put the car on cruise control and get to your destination without ever really focusing on the driving, right? It's kind of in the background. You're just attending to not hitting the ditch. And that's kind of what happens, is that you're no longer focused on the movements of the world or your movements within the world. You're focused on just the beingness that you are, the existence. So the spiritual life or practice is to find that stillness, that mona, where there isn't any thoughts in consciousness, and just abide there. Abide in and as thought-free awareness. And the universe, as it always is, takes care of itself. Both of my cats are rather dowish, black and white. Well, that sounds pretty deep. The essence of Maya or ideology is then the evacuation of the monad, this non lucid subject, the dreamer of the world. I don't even know what a monad is. Yeah, it's it's taking yourself to be the character. Another analogy is an actor playing a role. So the the state of ignorance isn't that it's something that you don't know and that you need to discover. It's more like a forgetting or just temporarily playing a part. So, God, you being the best actor ever that's possible, can fool itself, even, right? So, it's also the coming out of the ignorance is a forgetting or a temporary acting, right? Just pretending, always temporary. Monad is the supreme being, divinity, or the totality of all things. Well, I would call that Brahman, but sure. Yeah, so Brahman forgets temporarily, and that would be Atman. So Atman is the actor that Brahman is. Atman is the character that Brahman, the actor, is playing, right? So it's the same. Obviously, the actor and the character are the same in the actor, right? So that's the relationship of Brahman and Atman. Brahman and Atman are the same entity, but Atman is the character, the role that Brahman is temporarily pretending to be. Hmm. Yeah. I've never I've heard of nomad, but not monad. So if we apply that to Christianity, well, then Christ was the Atman, right? Because he realized that he was God acting as Christ. I'm not very well read, so I don't know of all these philosophers and their theories, and I'm not well read. Leibniz wrote monadology in 1714. So Shunyamurti came up with Atmanology. Hmm. I've stopped following Shunyamurti. There he is. I've got another SS in my life now. I still can't pronounce his last name. Swami something Ananda. Starts with an S. He's the head of the New York Vedanta Society. Hmm. He's great. He's I love him. He's great. No, there's no replacing. There's just adding. Every like everything that guy says, I am in complete agreement with. Everything. Like he's and it was interesting the way he was talking about the history of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, and how Buddhism is actually against it. Like Buddhism is a branch off of Hinduism, and how the Buddha basically rejected the idea of an eternal, timeless, permanent, unchanging self. So now Buddhism, and that's why Buddhism didn't work for me, is because it's basically I consider it to be wrong because they there's no self at all in Buddhism, like no self, not a transcendent, eternal, God. There's no God and no self. So that just doesn't work. Yeah, that's him. Swami Sarvaparana. Nah, I can't. I just can't pronounce it. So he's the second SS. But it came so clear to me when he was talking about the history of Buddhism and when it came up, and it was basically how it was refuting the self, any type of God or any type of self that 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 Advaita holds on to. So it was like, well, that's why I was called myself a Buddhist for a decade, and yet it didn't work. And then when I found Ramana Maharshi teaching, all the Buddhists booted me out. I couldn't. They couldn't align with my new understanding, so I got the boot, and I stopped calling myself a Buddhist because it's just another religion. In my opinion, Buddhism is another religion that's not quite as messed up as Christianity, but it's not it's branching off the highest teaching, which is Advaita Vedanta. I mean, to say that there's no self, that's insanity. You're basically denying your own existence. Ugh, very confused. They're very confused. Well, An Atman, isn't that just the jiva? There's so many, and Hinduism is far too complex and convoluted in many respects as well. Like, why do they have Brahman and Atman. I get that. I get Brahman, Atman. And then they've got Ishvara and Vishnu and Kali and Krishna and Shiva. Like, let's pare this down, people. Just call Brahman God, and then you can get rid of Ishvara or whatever, however they pronounce it. There is no non-self. There's appearances, and then there's the reality. And yeah. But there's no such thing as no non-self. It's like saying word nothing. There is no such thing as nothing. It's like saying, why are there no pink unicorns? It's like well, see, religion quite often falls into the same trap as science, which is just trying to explain everything. And that's not the point. The point of religion is not to explain everything. The point of religion is to get you to reality. And the path of truth, the path of explaining it, can lead to the experience of the reality. And that would be truth. The path of truth leads one to reality, which is Satchitananda, and then you're done because you're happy. You can't ever possibly describe everything perfectly. It's hardwired into existence that you can't know everything perfectly in order to describe reality perfectly. But that's the trap that a lot of teachers and religions get into, is just trying to explain it all. And same is trapped in that cycle as well, trying to explain it all. But they'll never explain the why, and the why is the only question that really matters. It doesn't matter the how, the when, the where, the who. You can you can know all that to the best, the highest degree possible, and it'll never reveal the why. You have to drop all that stuff trying to figure out the how. The how will never lead to the why. Why are we here? That's the question. See that, and the hard problem of consciousness is just Maya distracting again. The, it's not important to know how this is all happening. The, the important thing is to know why this is all happening. And that's just a red herring. It's just a dead end or a treadmill to think that we could ever, one, we can't possibly ever know 100% the how. And even if we could, that would never lead us to the why anyway. So it needs to be abandoned. Is your feed not working very well? Is it all pixelated? Yeah, I sometimes it goes wonky. I'm in northern BC. It's central, but I'm in the north, and I've got Elon's rig, Starlink, and it's maybe temperamental. So I apologize. Yeah, I don't know. I moved the router closer. I don't know what else to do. Maybe it's all the Kundalini energy that's coming out of my third eye. Just making shit up. The hard problem is impossible the way it's framed. Makes for the perfect rabbit hole for philosophers. Philosophers love setting up questions that they can't ever answer because then they can just keep talking. They don't want to go back. They don't want to admit that the question is why. It's not how material or the firings of neurons in the brain, how that turns into subjective experience. That doesn't it doesn't matter. You'll never, first of all, like I said, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle makes it, because if the firings of neurons in the brain are subject to quantum rules, then you'll only ever know half of what is required to answer that question. How does it happen? So they reduce experience to electrical impulses in the brain, and then they stop there, and that's it. But it's just convenient that they stop there. Well, why did you stop there? Why don't you just keep reducing that experience of firings of neurons in the brain down, 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 keep reducing it to quantum, and then what? Right? Then you've got half of what you need to know. So yeah, it's you can't ever answer the how with 100% certainty. So the why requires intuition, and science don't do that. Science doesn't deal with intuition at all. So they're just hamsters on wheels. They like hearing themselves talk because they know they exist when they're talking. That's it. When a philosopher and a scientist are talking, and it's do you exist? Yeah. Do I exist? Yes, you exist. 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 That's the conversation. That's really what's going on. They just think that the important part of it is the information that's being exchanged, but it isn't. It's just reaffirming their own existence, having something relative to them, reaffirming it. That's what philosophy is. it's it's almost quaint, right? It's almost quaint what's happening, but they think that they're just all that, right? They're just really getting to some deep truth. Would that not also apply to all human interactions? Yes. Why do people talk about what they talk about? Like, oh, they talk about other people, and then they talk about the past. They talk about everything that reaffirms the ego, right? So that's all about reinforcing the ego. I did that. How are you doing? How's Jane? What's, like it's all interaction. Everything that occurs, everything that arises within the awareness is this relative existence. You know you exist. The ego knows it exists only relative to something else. So that's why all of humanity is filling every single empty space with something, right? We're trying to fill every little gap with a thought or sensation, but it doesn't work because all of it is unsubstantial. There's no reason for people to talk about what they talk about. It's not nonsense. It's just, do I exist? Yes, you exist. Do I exist? Yes, you exist. That's all it is. When they could just sit there in their existence together, just sit there. You exist. It's obvious. Or it's more like you are existence itself. The body exists, and someday it will not exist. But the existence upon which that body is appearing is always there, always here. You could say any interactions at all. Interaction requires two. But being doesn't require two. Would you say that the dream character is like a hurricane? There are all sorts of thoughts about the dream character that swirl around, but at the center there's just peace. Yeah, sure. Yeah. The spiritual practice is to find that which doesn't change. So the quality of thought-free awareness is that the frame of reference upon which everything arises from and passes to, that is unchanging. So one could also call that stillness or mona. And it's also the point where the two extremes come together and they're perfectly in balance in that spot. The yin and the yang, no matter how strong they are and how abruptly they're mixing, there's a point where, or yeah, a point, a spot, a point where they're perfectly balanced. And I guess that could be the singularity. And right now, what's happening is that the bifurcation is distinct, and that's building up very, very powerful forces. Like think of a magnet. Like take for instance the American governmental system, democracy. There's the left and the right, there's the Democrats and the Republicans. And as that system nears its collapse, those polarities are becoming, and it's exact, right? It's perfectly down the middle. It's crazy how close the elections are. So what happens in a magnet is that normally the metal, there's, let's just call it the spin. Everything's spinning, all the particles are spinning, just probably not randomly, but in a way that has everything balanced out. And what happens in a magnet when it becomes polarized is that it changes everything on the left, on the left, to be, let's say, negatively charged, spin 90 degrees this way, and then the other side is the opposite spin. So it makes, it's still balanced, but the energy that magnetic field generates is very, very powerful. When everything is on one side is negative and everything on the other side is the opposite spin, that's what's happening. And it's generating so much energy because it's so perfectly strongly polarized that when it flips, when that energy is released, it'll be civil war probably, and the complete destruction of the United States. tornadoes are the same thing, right? It's where there's a very definite high pressure system and a low pressure system, very, very definite and distinct. And where they meet, it's just a sharp, sharp line. And that develops into a powerful tornado. And that tornado works towards realigning everything, rebalancing everything back to normal. It releases all that energy. So there's an immense amount of energy being built up. And same with the world, right? Like the East and the West, the G7 and the BRICS. Everything's becoming polarized. And I don't think there's any way to the way in which that will be relieved is probably through World War III. How do you feel about propaganda? Well, everything's propaganda. There's no way to tell what's true anymore. When I was a kid, we used to think that the news was biased, and I think it was unbiased. Sorry, and that it was they were everyone was working towards an objective interpretation of what was happening in the world. And now there's everyone has an agenda. Everyone puts a little spin on the actual information in order to propagate their agenda. The answer is less screen time. They can't affect you if you're not paying attention to them. I laugh when people say how powerful the internet is and how it 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 controls humans' behavior so strongly. But all you have to do is not look at the screen. That's all you have to do is turn it off. How powerful is it? It's the weakest thing in the world, and yet if you pay attention to it, it's the strongest thing in the world. Stop believing. Well, reality, there's you don't have to believe in what's true. You don't have to believe what's real. You just have to experience reality. You don't have to believe in reality. So, yeah, a belief is obviously a concept. So, drop all beliefs. Seems to me that we can have a sense of whether someone is lying or being honest. I think most people don't have that ability, especially with themselves. Most people are just lying to themselves constantly. But yes, of course. But it's harder to find the truth when you have such when you yourself have very strong belief systems, because those belief systems are actually there to construct the ego, some sort of identity. My belief systems are who I am, right? So therefore, if that's who you are, if that's what you are, that makes up your identity, then to change those belief systems means that you yourself, your ego is in constant flux. So that's why people hold on so strongly to their belief systems. Fundamentalists especially, they have no idea who they really are, what they really are. So they hold on so tightly to their belief systems, and it's like an attack on their very being when someone challenges those. So they just can't even go there, right? Intuition. Science has taught us to not trust our intuition, but the intuition is that extra half that brings about understanding, because Heisenberg's uncertainty principle says that we can only ever know half and exactly half of what is required to know everything. So, what's the other half? What's the magic elixir or additive to the equation for someone to actually know something? Well, that's intuition. By the way, how do you heat your house? It's not easy. It's primarily wood. So there's a furnace downstairs with a big box about this big that I feed firewood in. And there's another one right there, fireplace, stove type thing. And then I supplement with electric because it's an enormous house, right? So it's a lot of chopping wood, a lot of cutting down wood before the season. I try to um, get most of my wood from my own land here. So when it gets cold, like when it gets minus 30, it's really tough to keep this place warm. It's very difficult to keep it warm. Fortunately, when it's sunny, there's so many windows that um, the sun, when it's sunny out, it's easy to keep it warm. But when it's cloudy and cold, it's tough to keep it warm. A lot of chopping wood. I like it. Well, gang, I think that's Sunday service for today, for this week. We don't seem to be increasing our numbers, but what we do have is a pretty good base, pretty solid. So just keep holding to the practice and seeing if it's working for you. Oh, now of course when I say I'm gonna stop, there's more people coming in, but it's just so interesting how few people are interested in this. Like it's just wild to me how this is not catching on. I'm sitting here just being absolutely happy and content. And people come in and no, you're not supposed to be in the pool table there. Get. People come in and see this guy just sitting there, and I don't know, should I be look happier? Like, should I try to look more content? They come in and then they see that there's no action happening, so then they leave right away. Like, what are you looking for? What are you looking for? Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it. I mean, it's just Kali Yuga. This is the end of Kali Yuga. No one can recognize. No one is. It seems like no one is even able to discern what's truth and what's real anymore. Even the ability to think properly, even that isn't. No one can even think properly anymore on their own, right? To try to make their own decisions and think for themselves. It seems like people can't do that anymore. Yeah, solution seeker is my guy. Like he might be more pivotal in this whole non-conceptuality thing than he thinks, but we'll see what happens. The That other SS, maybe he has something to do with this too, because he would be perfect the perfect poster child for this message, because one, he gets it, but he will get it because I haven't studied Advaita Vedanta at all, other than the little bit of Ramana Maharshi that I read before I started engaging in the practice. And when he talks about Advaita Vedanta, I get it. Every single word that he says and every example that he gives, I get it. I just intuitively understand and agree with everything that Advaita Vedanta says, even though I haven't studied it at all. So, like he uses the same language, the same metaphors. He's saying the same things that I am. So this is why, again, I've sent it off to someone, but this guy, he's not a scientist. He's not an academic. He's an Advaita Vedanta monk, right? So he, I'm, we'll see, we'll see. I keep thinking that this has to break out. It has to. The message is too important. It can't just sit here with me and a dozen other people. It's too important. It's the most important message ever. So how is it that it won't get out? It doesn't seem right to me that it won't expand and be really, really important. I just, it doesn't make sense that something like that can can, can be recognized, even if it is by a nobody, an unknown like me. What is it going to take for it to explode into the collective consciousness and for non-conceptuality to be a thing, right? To be a known word and a thing that people talk about, non-conceptuality, right? And these messages that you're God and the number system, it has to come to fruition. And I guess my job is to just sit in stillness and let it grow, I guess. But it's you people, this little band of half a dozen people that are the roots of this non-conceptuality thing. So bless you all, and let's just hold to it and see what happens. So yeah, there's more people coming in. All right, I'll chill. I'll chill a little longer. I really have nothing else to do. So maybe put some more wood on. I think people just keep looking for more highs, don't they? They think that even spiritual seekers, I think it's an experience that it's some sort of ecstasy, or they're going to reach some sort of, that it's an experience, but it's the experiencer. And the subjective experience, I guess, would just be perfect contentment and happiness. It's not a high. Needs to be found, not taught. Yeah. I spent many, many, many years trying to just grabbing people by the shoulders and just like, look at this. And it just doesn't work. It's going to be a very few people that are interested in this. The vast majority of human consciousness is headed towards hell. And we're so close, and they just are oblivious. This new COP28, they're talking about climate change, right? Is like the worst ever. Like it's getting so much resistance from the oil companies. We're we're doomed. Society will begin collapsing in 2024. Buy crypto. That's my advice to make the dream a better dream. Is look into buying cryptocurrency, especially the Cardano blockchain. Yeah, people are not looking. People think that someone like Jesus is going to come and save them, right? But no one's coming to save you. You have to do this. The reason for your life is to do this, is to find out who and what you are, and to stop this karmic momentum that keeps you in this feedback loop, this time loop, and keeps you ignorant. It's all up to the individual. There's no one is coming to save you, especially the freaking government. Okay, I'm out of here this time for sure. And if not, maybe I'll pop in sometime at random during the week. Hang in there, gang.